muchachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Would you mind announcing me last this time around?
Okay.
I have a thing.
Mm-hmm. A music podcast where a group of friends gather together, share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. A little fun time had by all. I'm PD Rave. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew. We've got Drew, all the way there.
Hey, just Q-tip in my ear because I like to live dangerously.
Mm-hmm. And we've got David Majors, aka DJN.
Buenos tacos, muchachos, and Masahiko Kobe is Iron Chef Italian.
Mm-hmm. We're here to talk about music. We're here to talk about an album, and the provider of the album is none other than Drew. Drew, what have you brought forth for us today?
The Italiano. So this is a band where I probably haven't listened to an entire album of theirs since I was a kid listening to this album. But they're always a band that a lot of their music ends up on playlists of mine. It ends up in my regular rotation. A band I find interesting and a lot of fun. From Jacksonville, Florida, Yellowcard with Ocean Avenue.
David, what was your mindset? What were your expectations coming into this album?
I had heard of Yellowcard before. I never really sought out their music, but Yellowcard is one of those names that I've heard over the years in passing. I'm aware that they're popular and they have a pretty devoted following. I was aware of that. And I was aware that they were in the emo, punk, pop punk space, Venn diagram, whatever you want to call it. So I at least had an awareness of their existence. And in that regard, as I was looking them up, I saw, they do some violin. They throw a little violin in there every now and then. That's interesting. So I'd never listened to them until now, but I was interested and intrigued because I'm always interested in this side of music that I'm just not too familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm familiar with a lot of the things from that era and this genre. The 2000s emo has been one of my wheelhouses, one of my fond memories. So I was looking forward to just getting into this. But yeah, Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, DJ put a big point on it over there. As a ska fan, what drew me initially when I first heard the genre was the horns, right? You had horns layering with these cool melodies, and it was a fun time had by all. With Yellowcard, hearing sounds that I was familiar with and like melodies I was familiar with like being a fan of those first like 4 Blink records, MXPX, Mass, they were a band that in the early aughts, it was within my wheelhouse. From this, I think, came out in 2003, if memory serves. So it was a sound that I was already into, and then you added that layer of violin. You added that like little interesting thing that sort of layered melody on top of the melodies that you were used to. Now, the thing about Yellowcard is the things under the violin are sometimes a little bit derivative of the other music at the time. Like I pointed out, MXPX and Blink-182. The MXPX will come back in a little bit. But the violin does really add a lot of cool styles and lets them play around with the genre a little bit. Within here, you had like the more pop punk side of things, but you also had some like sort of quieter, almost acoustic-y stuff that had like this grandiose feel in the background because of the long legato sort of violin pulls. And when we say violin, it is a like electric sort of synthy violin, but you're getting the same note structure that you would on a violin. So you're getting like long legato notes over top of these very staccato guitar parts, which is cool. But what really struck me going back, because like I said, I haven't listened to this. There's a couple of songs on here that I did not know that Yellowcard was as Christian adjacent as they apparently are.
Yeah, even I'd heard that.
I like it completely.
It's like them and Reliant K, I believe.
Oh, Reliant K was like, I was just actually about to say it, like MXPX and Reliant K played a live Cornerstone. They were very upfront about the religious aspect of them. Like looking it up, like when I heard it, I was like, wait, were they? And I looked up. No, they never talked about being religious. They never like put that anywhere. They were Paramore had some religious background to them, but never like talked about it. And it feels like this is the same. It was like, yeah, no, we're Christians. We wrote some songs that have like Christian stuff to them, but they never like pushed it like say a Reliant K or like I don't want to say Newsboys because I don't like Newsboys, but Newsboys or like Five Iron Frenzy did, or God, DC Talk
or Striper.
What was it?
Or Terramaze.
Yeah, Striper. Striper was the one that was throwing. It was the hair metal band that threw out Bibles during.
I think so,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't like that, but like hearing certain songs on here and then going back and re-listening to other ones with that context was really weird for me. Not like off-putting or making me angry or anything, but just like, oh, I never knew that. Like, I guess I did listen to these when I was like 13, 14, and then went back to the like 4 songs I liked and didn't go back to Believe.
Misophonia.
Yep. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album musically as a kind of pop punk emo kind of album with a bit more mature songwriting. And I would also say, I believe his name is Ryan Key, actually has a pretty decent voice. It is sort of on the higher end in terms of male rock vocalists, but his voice fits the music, and he has really good vocal control, which is always great to hear. He actually sounds like he knows what he's doing with his voice, and he doesn't have the pop punk whiny voice that I can't stand. And all of these songs have melodies, they have choruses, and he's singing over them, and it doesn't sound unnatural. And I just wanted to point that part out, is that he's a really good singer, and I think he does lift this material a little bit. I think he does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the musically it's on at its base level, it's emo music, as it were. It is.
They'd be talking about emotions, though.
Yeah. It is pretty much like good, but baseline. I would say above Mendoza line emo music, as far as like it goes, and it's elevated by the vocals and by the performance and kind of having those little touches here and there, as far as like also having like little pieces of variety in the album as well that utilizes the violin and the kind of like the different stylings. But yeah, it is at its core, you know, some like it fits in there as one of those like that's an emo band and this is an emo album, and you know that they kind of like had been setting that standard for a couple albums, and then you know this was the album that kind of like put it up, you know, into another, you know, into put them up into another level as far as like being hit makers, or at least they made a hit with this album. But overall, it's a really solid emo album, and I think it stands up well. That the guitar work is fine. The melodies are there. The energy is there when they bring in the energy. The violin doesn't feel out of place too much. Like it feels like it fits, which makes sense. Like a classical string instrument is not out of place in rock music, because if you've ever seen any unplugged, there's always just a cello player there, because it adds a kind of like a filler hum to kind of make everything feel less like less empty. So it fits. So it kind of being the star is a really nice like change. A really nice like differentiator in this genre that was at the time. Yeah. Let's bring it back.
That's the Andy Dalton line for you football fans out there.
Let's take it to the key tracks. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you for us to zero in on?
Well, the first song I had ever heard from these guys was the first track, so I can't not do me. Way Away being the first track. One, I heard it on Road Rules, oddly enough, which was super weird. But a lot of overdrive, but a quiet verse that allows sort of that violin, especially on verse 2, to really like pop. And it was also, it's a simple pop punk premise, so it's easy for like pop punk fans to sort of, I want to leave my small town and I want to be somebody and I want to do more in the world than just be from a small town. Which is like every pop punk band has like 5 of those on like every second record. So, Ocean Avenue,
but only 2 afterwards.
It's you've got to have one on every one, and then like you inundate another one. There's also the thought of emo bands are only good for 3 records. But that's emogame.com. There's a background. Also, there's a lot of wind noise, Petey, from somebody.
Oh, don't worry. I think Skype is trying to hear. Skype is probably cranking up my audio. Don't worry about it.
Yep, you sound a little hot. Then Ocean Avenue. If you know one Yellowcard song, it's probably Ocean Avenue. The staccato guitar in the verse leading into sweeping violins in the chorus. Just a really driving song. One of my favorite songs from them, I'm going to talk about and then get back to. The Life of a Salesman. Something about the pace of Life of a Salesman, like the like very quick verses with the very like quick lyricism and the quick words and the rhythmic nature of them, I think was really, really cool. Also, I'm a sucker for like the jet effect on a guitar. I don't know why. I've always loved that. But then again, like I said in the beginning a little bit, the violin runs, the vocals, like the vocals really shining through on Believe, and that grandiose nature of it. Like I had to sit back for a second. I was like, oh shit. Like they did this and I missed it entirely when I was like 13, didn't I? Like that's weird. But like it works, right? And it works not only on a musical standpoint, but it works on like that sort of a grandiose, like getting everybody in the crowd to feel a thing that music like this does. And and that every band that has even a little bit of religious backing in them usually has one of these. And I feel silly not realizing it. And then going back to Life of a Salesman with that, I was like, oh, this works on a couple of different levels, doesn't it? I'm real stupid.
David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I will start with only one. Again, the vocal melody in the verse I thought was really, really strong. And I love when a rock band of any kind does not shy away from writing good vocal melodies and having a really good singer. This might be the track that I like the most. Miles Apart. One was the chorus that I highlighted, and I noticed that was the track where I first really started noticing Ryan Key's voice, and it really started to stand out to me. That was the chorus of that song was really what caught my attention. View from Heaven. I liked the guitar melody in that one, and the final track on the album, I believe the 14th track, Back Home. Really felt that way. It brought everything on the album back home and really tied it all up in a nice little package.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I would say Way Away. If you're wondering where you heard, it's one of those like
an Empty Apartment. Which
I was going to bring up. Way Away. Which as soon as like it started playing, I was like, I didn't know this song. Then I realized it's probably either from Madden 2004 or SSX3. Probably SSX.
There's a few of those.
Or yeah, probably like you said, Road Rules or like a TV show that used it. But yeah, it's what it was like. Oh yeah, I know the song. And it started playing. I was like, oh yeah. And if I was gonna pick out, because you guys pretty much like, I would echo a lot of what you guys said. But Empty Apartment is a really nice ballad. And has the vocals are really fantastic, and has a fun little guitar solo and a violin solo, which is really cool. And I would say another one where the violin shines is View from Heaven. Yeah, I'd say those are what I would like. On top of what has been said, I would say those would be the ones that I pick out on. Let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, what will be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I was not entirely sure at first. I'm not sure what it says about the album that it really took about the 6th track for things to open up for me. And then afterwards on my second listen, it started to sink in on the second listen. But yeah, it did kind of take a while for it to click. But it did eventually. They did well incorporating different elements into their sound without completely moving off from their identity and where they want to fit in. But they added a little bit of things here and there, just kind of as a garnish, if you will. It wasn't totally stirred into the recipe, but it was a garnish. The first few tracks of the album were very paint by numbers, emo / pop punk. And I think that's why I say it wasn't until track 6 where I really started to get into it. But after those first couple of tracks, it really does open up. And I think that's the sign of a good album overall, that the intro songs might be just a little bit of what you're looking for, but once the album goes on, you really start to take everything in.
Yeah. For me, this is a great example of like one of the like cornerstone like emo albums of like pointing to people as saying, if somebody was asking what was emo in the in the early aughts, you would pick a couple albums, and this would be among them. And I think it's a really solid album, really fun album, and kind of like has a little bit of that nostalgia to kind of like elevate it a little bit for some of us. But I think still stands on its own pretty well, and is a really solid kind of like quintessential release, as it were. Yeah, Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
For me, Yellowcard's one of those bands where, and I was victim to it. I said it. I haven't listened to the whole thing since I was a kid. I picked out what my favorite songs are from this album, from the next one. There's a couple as well. Lights and Sounds is great. Again, I'm a sucker for the sort of stretched out jet engine guitar thing. But they're a band that, yes, they at times the things they were doing could be a little derivative of what was happening at the time, and yes, they are sort of a good like wedge of, hey, here's what like the pop punk emo scene was doing from like 2001 to 2006, like sort of crammed together in a lot of ways. But there's still a lot of like really interesting things that were going on, and a lot of really interesting like musicianship, and they were good at what they did. Like sometimes you got some of the pop punk bands, I mentioned Mest before, that had a sound, and the sound was good, but like you kind of knew that they didn't have anywhere else to go, that they were gonna be in that pigeonhole for a while. But like Yellowcard's other stuff, like their next album is different from this one. Their album after that was different from that one. They had understanding of their instruments and who they were, like some punk bands never get out of. And that's coming from somebody who likes punk rock. But sometimes there's only so much those dudes can fucking do. It happens. But these guys knew what they were doing, and it was inventive and it was fun.
Yeah. Those are our thoughts on Yellowcard's Ocean Avenue. You can, of course, check it out on our Spotify playlist, Play Record Breakers, the home game, do your due diligence. Now we get to... Oh, yeah.
There we go. You got it.
We get to... I was going to... Like, I went into saying those words knowing that we were going to transition to the haiku reviews, and then in the middle of saying the sentence, I forgot. If you want to understand how ADHD works, literally went into that sentence. All right, I'm going to transition away from complete thoughts into haiku reviews, and then forgot about haiku reviews altogether.
This is accurate.
Yeah. Now we get to the main event of the evening. The moment we've all been waiting for. Our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic form with the 575. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haikumero numero uno. David, what is your haiku?
More sauce than I thought. Pop punk with something extra. It's perfectly fine.
My haiku. The Violin Band. Quintessential emo hit of the early aughts. And last but not least, Drew, what is your haiku?
A band from my past that needed a second chance. A soft spot still there.
Mm-hmm. All right. And of course, you can find this album on both our Spotify playlist and our YouTube playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game, do your due diligence, and your due diligence. On those playlists will be next week's record. And it's somewhat connected to the theme of today's. Speaking of bands of the 2000s, I thought I'd bring out another band that we've talked about before in the past, that made their heyday in the early aughts. But we're not going to talk about an album from the early aughts. We're just going to talk about the album they released this year, because that's more fun. We're going to talk about Alien Ant Farm and their recently released Mantras. So,
Holy yes. Okay. I've been looking for a reason to listen to that more.
Pick.
I love Alien Ant Farm.
Yeah.
Oh man, spoiler alert.
And picking the new album instead of like the album that had their hit.
yeah, we didn't even.
I love it.
That one time we talked about it before, we didn't even pick that because that was Brett's pick of True Ant, which came after that.
I love
album.
it.
I was gonna say
Which
he
is another
picked
great
True Ant,
album.
which was after Anthology.
Yeah,
Ah, yes.
and we loved that
they were
album
one of my
as
favorite
well.
bands to play with. They were so good. Okay.
Yeah.
I get to
Also,
hear the new stuff. Awesome.
even Anthology had another great song that wasn't Smooth Criminal, which was Movies, which honestly I love better.
That was a
Movies
good
were
song.
so good.
Movies. That is a good
And
song.
Wish.
Mhm.
Wasn't
Uh,
Wish? Wish was the song I'm thinking of, right?
I don't know. It might be on True Ant.
I don't know.
Well, we'll see.
Edie, wrap it up while Drew's looking that up.
While he figures that out, we'll talk about that. That'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. Recordbreakers.fun, rebelli.net. You can find all the episodes, show notes, and links and things like that. Rebelli TV on YouTube. Go ahead and like, share, subscribe, do all the things on there. Find us live on Rebelli TV for this and all of our other shows. We're trying to get back into the rhythm of things. But this, Through the Tomes, are real play TTRPG good times. And our GM mode streams, which are basically just us talking about life and stuff in a wrestling. And it's just basically a wrestling and bullshit podcast. But we also play WWE 2K24 My GM, which is fun. Yeah.
I talk a lot about my experiences in the hospital on Friday.
Yes,
This is
unfortunately, this episode is a couple of weeks ahead because Drew was unfortunately on the NPI list, the
Yes.
non-podcast related injury list.
Exactly.
But he's back and we're happy to have him.
Yes. We're gonna have a fun
In a
episode.
wheelchair.
Avoided IR.
Yes.
Avoided IR.
We're gonna do full gear next, and we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff. But yeah, look forward to that. But that'll be then, and this is now. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Fighting.
Crying nut.
Also, Wish was on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3.
Yeah.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.